Thanks so much. I assure you I will not be talking about the Oxford comma, nor nuclear fuel, nor high field magnetics, because that's not a 5-minute presentation. Fucking nuclear fuel? Come on. So, yeah, write down that social. Everyone take a minute. My name's Dan. Why I am relevant. You guys never gave me a briefing on this. Pew, pew. I'm not a technical founder. Yeah, I started a company called Tantalus Labs. I gave a TED Talk last year, yada, yada. Not a big deal. And I was named to the top 40 under 40 for rising stars of cannabis just recently. So it's like the biggest fish in the tiniest little pond of a nascent industry. But I do grow weed for a living, which is kind of cool. I may be the first entrepreneur that you've met that grows weed for a living, but I won't be the last. The industry is expanding really rapidly. And what I'm here to talk to you about today is pricing, which is a really cool consideration in our business. And it's relevant, I think, for SaaS companies, for software development, for whatever widgets and apps and things you guys are doing. And so it's probably relevant to start off from the beginning. I was really lucky to get in with a group of super cool co-founders. I founded my company with a group of bioscientists, chemists, horticultural guys, just a group of people that were eager to design the textbook in the future for what cannabis cultivation could look like in the next 10 years. And it fostered this really rad culture of debate, constant first principles reasoning, like overthinking simple problems, which seems like it might be a bit of a waste of time in this whole agile development methodology, but it's actually really reasonable when you're starting a company to build that culture right into what it is that you do. And it allowed us to build North America's first cannabis-tailored industrial greenhouse, just here, which is in Maple Ridge. It's 120,000 square feet. It's the largest cannabis production facility in Western Canada, and I think the 5th largest in the world. And it's fucking rad. We grow weed there. It's like a science lab that we grow weed in. So it looks like that, which isn't really the best way to display it because you can't really see. But you can go to tantaluslabs.com/sunlab and check it on out. And so, yeah, we've got a massive greenhouse over there, and it looks like that on the inside. And it's really a cool testament of what a team can do when they just sort of sit down, boil things down, get engineering done, and design stuff over a longer time horizon. It took us 4 years, 2.5 years of design and 1.5 years of construction to get here, but this isn't the only thing that we do. We do cultivate cannabis in this facility, but we're actually obligated by our regulator to have full vertical integration baked into our product schema. So what it is that we do really is sell cannabis on the internet. We just have to grow it in this facility in order to make that happen. So it creates this obligation for a digitally native, vertically integrated brand, sort of like a Warby Parker or Clearly Contacts. And it necessitates a huge amount of focus on last yard. We've got this great agricultural science center, huge amount of automation, mechanization, data capture, and data analytics. But that really just serves to facilitate our end user, who we attract through growth hacking and stuff that I don't really deal too much in. We leave that to the digital guys. But we had this modeling problem at the outset of our enterprise where we had to figure out what kind of a customer we wanted to talk to and how we were going to speak to that audience. And you know, this facility is really fantastic because the automation and the kind of innovative principles around it allow us to create a really low-cost production model. And when we were taking advice from early advisors and investors and bankers, they said, simple, Econ 101, price low, own the whole market. And that was actually, I think, for the first probably 6 months of our operations, the assumption that we operated under. But we slowly realized that that would force us to forego a substantial amount of opportunity. The opportunity to surprise and delight through things like packaging and direct marketing, R&D, a huge amount of research opportunities we couldn't facilitate with the margins that we were going to develop. So it took us pretty sophisticated modeling exercises to realize that we don't actually want to be that brand. And there's some really great analogs that start in the coffee market. Arabica price since 1970. Okay, ignore this ridiculous spike that happened because of a coffee blight and I think like some ridiculous forwards contracts. Coffee is a really boring industry at a commodity level. If you want to compete on price in coffee, you need to be an absolutely massive firm. You're going to grow really slowly. You have to have huge barriers to entry that are associated with economies of scale. The whole supply chain is dominated by really ridiculous forwards contracts, like 25 years forwards contracts. It's a really boring industry to be in from an innovation perspective. It grows at about 1.5% a year and has done, except for this massive spike, since the 70s, and it's just dry as a bone from an innovation and kind of entrepreneurial perspective. Now that's commodity coffee. On the alternate, specialty coffee, this is a consumption graph, but what it alludes to is that the specialty coffee market has grown at about 15% per year since the 1970s. Really exceptional market growth. I didn't even really realize that was going on in the 80s and 90s. And we can see it in the last 10 years in the proliferation of kind of the specialty coffee marketplaces as typified by our diverse thousands of coffee shops that we have here in Vancouver. Specialty coffee is kind of an overarching, broad terminology for coffee that might be organic or single origin, grown in a special way, direct trade, fair trade. All these things kind of come under this specialty coffee banner, but it's an inverse price elasticity. This is substantially more expensive than commodity grade coffee, and people like you can't wait to line up and pay $4, $5, $6 a cup for coffee that has a story behind it. And it's because it reflects a value system that you care about. I want to have a good fucking cup of coffee. I want to have a cup of coffee that I can tell a story about, a cup of coffee that I feel good buying. And as a result, I don't find myself too frequently in a Seattle's best. I don't really want to come at Tim Hortons. For some reason, it's a horrible publicly traded company that's shaved their margin every year for the last 10 years, but it's a Canadian icon, so I don't really want to attack them. But yeah, Tim Hortons, they buy commodity grade coffee. It's not that exciting. So yeah, it's a really interesting economic phenomena because this market is growing really quickly and the commodity grade coffee market is not. The analog translates really well into the cannabis market, where we have a few cool kind of test tube jurisdictional case studies on what happens when you legalize cannabis, one of which is directly south of us in Washington State. It's a market that I make my business to be pretty friendly with. A really smart group of operators, and once again, we see this inverse price elasticity. You know, the advice of saying, okay, grow cannabis as cheaply and as quickly as you can and sell it to as wide an audience as you can, it hasn't played out in the market dynamics in Washington State. So you can't read any of this, and it was a completely ridiculous slide to put in, but what I can tell you is the guys that own Grow Up Farms, Northwest Cannabis Solutions, and BMF Washington are really cool. They grow really amazing cannabis products. They price their products what would seem exceptionally high relative to dispensaries here in Vancouver, and they own the upper third of the marketplace, probably quartile, and that's $20 million a year in revenue. They didn't have that. That revenue was zero 2 years ago. So there is an exciting market opportunity in cannabis for all of you that are interested in coming on board. But nonetheless, these guys do not grow mids. If someone calls your weed mids and you're a cannabis grower, just to let you in on the terminology, it means that you suck. Mids are widely available, commodity grade, low-end cannabis, and you can't buy them because nobody wants to stock them, because nobody wants to sell them, because nobody wants to buy them. So inversely, quads, quadruple A cannabis, white ash, terpenous, oily, dank, you know what I'm talking about. I know you guys are all secret stoners, don't? These are products that are priced at $20 a gram, which if you're unfamiliar with cannabis market dynamics is fucking a lot of money. It's really expensive, and they don't stay on shelves. Retailers are fighting over that relatively limited and sophisticated product market because it's really easy to sell them despite the fact that they're super expensive. So my thesis is thus. When you are modeling your price, and a surprising amount of entrepreneurs just kind of pick a price arbitrarily based on cost, don't pick a price based on cost. Pick a price that allows you the flexibility to grow on a 10-year time horizon, to adapt to your evangelist user base, to be able to listen and react to the marketplace, invest in research and development, and choose which company you want to be. You can be cheap and available to everyone, or you can be an innovator and a driver of change, and you cannot be both. Thank you very much. All right. This will be an interesting Q&A period. Secret stoner in the back. By the way, with the dude smoke too much weed thing at the beginning of your presentation, dude, come on.
Do we have questions?
Yes. Oh my God. That's like, what's your favorite fruit. It's like, what's your favorite? Yeah. Okay. I've been really on a Jack Herrera tip. It's a very balanced, mellow, hybrid. Okay, this actually opens up a good problem, Rena. Give me 30 seconds. Cannabis, the number one complaint I get about cannabis for people that are occasional users is the shit is too strong. It's too much. I don't want to smoke and get paranoid. Totally understandable. The breeders who grow cannabis and have been engineering that additional strength into it probably for the last 20 years, they smoke weed every day. So as a result, for the occasional user, I highly recommend, if you're going to be purchasing cannabis from a retail environment, that you just go into the dispensary or the bud tender and say, give me the mellowest shit that you have, please. Like, don't give me the stuff that you like because you're high right now. So my favorite strain right now, Jack Herrera. Very easy, very mellow. It's like having a glass of red wine at the end of your day. Say again? Favorite pricing model? Like from an economics 200 level perspective? I would say figure out a margin that's going to allow you to be flexible. Figure out a margin that is not you're not going to cut into it to a point where you're going to have to sacrifice your long-term value system. If you want to be an innovator, you want to emulate Apple, you want to emulate Tesla, you want to emulate Whole Foods. There's so many people that are like, I want to be Whole Foods in this audience. But these are companies that they price products exceptionally high. When the first iPhone came out, I mean, you remember that Steve Ballmer, he was like, it's half a grand, it's $500, no one's ever going to buy it. Well, they did. And we do, because it's a great product, and it's an experience-back product. It's not a product that is trying to compete on price, it's trying to compete on experience. So that's my simple advice. I think we were looking for like a statistical chart from like my econ classes, but that's, I guess, yeah. Don't be afraid to price yourself at a point where you're asking your user to invest in you. Because once they make that investment, they're going to feel a lot more confident about the product that they buy. And they're also going to be more forthcoming with their expectations, which is probably a good thing if you want candid evangelists.
Any more questions? Back.
Let's say you have a high quality product that was fast business, right? So go to buy in, and let's say you go to the highest dollar price, right? Not necessarily fast business, but so I have a high quality product. You just have to make timelines with that. Let's say you need to get 20,000 units over the next 2 years. You get that done, then you get that price. If you do 10,000 units over the next 2 years, then you get a higher price. Or what's your pricing model here in white there?
It's really hard to go up in price in any marketplace. If you establish yourself at a price point and then you ask your early users to tolerate an increase in price, there's going to be blowback for sure. It's a lot easier to come down in price. So I think my best advice for modeling that would be to say start off aggressive and say, look, we're an awesome product. Our SaaS service is going to change the way you do business. It's going to make your life easier. It's going to save you hiring people. There's an ROI here. Invest in us and we'll prove it. And if you don't prove it, or don't quite prove it, then don't be afraid to bring that product price down and try to expand your user base. Now, obviously, this isn't true for every market, but I guess my thesis is don't say cost plus 10%, easy, figured out the price, that's done. Make it a conversation.
I guess my question was more like, are you attaching a time model to a quantity model and with that one model? Like, so they get $3 per unit if you make 10,000 and $2.50 per unit if you do 50,000. Yeah, volume discount.
We do volume discounts. You can't charge the same at a gram as you would in an ounce. Like, we're trying to relate SaaS businesses to like drug dealing right now, which is tricky because that's how I contextualize the world. Right.
How do we keep customer retention is like very often we say basically you need to enter a 4-year contract, then you get that price, and you have to have that quantity. Versus you do a 2-year contract, that costs the same quantity per year, but the price tired because you're not committing that long to our product.
I think that sounds reasonable, and I can recontextualize it in my own perspective, which is like a direct-to-consumer product and a physical product, so it's a bit different. But nonetheless, we scale our operational costs as we scale our production volumes and scale our ability to serve a demand. So we've kind of built out our production methodology that, okay, let's design an OpEx that allows us to serve 500 customers. Like, I could call 500 people and demand that they purchase my cannabis in my own Rolodex, and if they don't, they're totally selling us out. So I'm gonna start there, and then I'm gonna say, okay, now let's figure out how we get to 1,000 and to 1,500, and we're scaling up OpEx as we go there. So in a SaaS context, you can scale your sales team, you can scale your development, you can scale your feature set, start with a really core and hopefully achievable objective and value add deliverable, and then just sort of scale that as you go. Don't try to say, we're gonna get 10,000 people buying our cannabis on day one. So I've been flipping between metaphors here. But yeah, be willing to bang your head against the wall on finding that elite user base that's willing to pay that premium, instead of putting yourself on a timeline that then sees you diluting your own value or your own price.
Okay, one more question?
Yeah, I'm really curious about the legal issues. You said that you sell online by two Canadians. Is that legal? What is the...
I don't get to stand at the Vancouver Economic Commission if everything I do isn't legal. So yes, what we do is legal. It's a really new nascent industry that was established. The rules were written 2.5 years ago, and they keep evolving and changing like almost on a weekly basis. But we are licensed by the federal government to produce and retail cannabis through an e-commerce direct-to-consumer model, direct to patients who have an authorization from a doctor to use medical cannabis. It's not the same as dispensaries, many of whom I deeply respect and admire, and some of whom I don't. And it's the first foray into adult use recreational cannabis that we're likely to see legislated in Canada in the next 1.5 years, which is crazy. So yeah, what we do is legit. I promise it's legit. We have a website, like an Instagram account. It's like a whole thing. Medical today, yeah.
All right, cool, thank you.